So today the concept is that we understand right after this segment what is a startup, what is the concept of a startup, and when we are so keen to actually go and initiate a startup, what are the causes of the failures, the challenges. So we're just going to sort it out that anybody and everybody from all over the globe, if they want to have a better understanding of a startup, ladies and gentlemen, this is the segment for you to listen to. We're very lucky that we've been joined by somebody who now very recently actually diversified his profile and the kind of career he had. So imagine he was a TEDx speaker, he has been to more than 100 companies, giving them soft skills and whatnot. He was a motivation speaker and a great one. Not that he wasn't doing it good. So he was absolutely fantastic at it, and now he's actually moving on to having his own artificial intelligence startup over here in Pakistan. But to talk about startup, ladies and gentlemen, he's the most apt guest because he recently went through that journey. He's the one and only Mr. Qamar Sheraz. Hello, assalamu alaikum, good morning after 3 years.
Yes, walaikum salam, good morning. Yes, thank you so much for having me on the show. Yes, after 3 years, so good to be back.
Likewise, you know, so you certainly believe that, okay, you know, work so hard in silence that your success makes the noise. I think that's what you were doing for the last 3 years.
Yes, exactly.
But very quickly, let's delve into it, and that is, what is the basic concept of a startup? When we say startup, do we think about being an entrepreneur? Do we think about technology? Do we think about having your own business of any sort or manufacturer? So what is the basic concept of a startup?
So, well, Shahzad and Haja, the basic concept of a startup, well, first of all, the startup is one of the most misdefined term in the whole world.
Okay.
So what people think of a startup is that any company which is in its initial stage of formation is a startup. And I also used to think the same.
True.
But that's not what a startup is.
All right.
A startup is a business model in which you build a product and then you scale it up and then you take an exit out of it. So in 3 words, a startup is build, scale and exit. So that's the very simple definition of a startup. Now the keyword over here is a startup should be the one which is scalable. If a conventional business is not scalable, it's not a startup. So the first condition that it should be a scalable startup. So that's why this definition, build, scale and exit.
And it's wonderful. Thank you so much for making us understand this as well, because from today onwards, Shark Tank will actually make sense to us. You know? Because otherwise we have been thinking it wrong. And certainly I think Shark Tank had actually kind of given a lot of people a lot of exposure as well, because that's what they're talking about. It's talking about the ability to scale that very product and that very business as well, and then exit. And then every year, you know, they're looking forward to making sure that their business is worth more than where they started. And it's wonderful. Why do you think, you know, so because it is the terminology these days, you know, when we were going to university, the terminology was entrepreneurship. These days it's a startup, and you know, so a lot of people think of having their own startups. So startup, do you think that we really need to have the product first ready to go and then go look for funding or marketing or whatsoever? Or do you think that first we go for funding and then work on a product? Because I think we should have a product first. Please go ahead.
Okay, yes, it's a very valid question, Shahzad. So the first thing is that a startup is a solution to a problem.
Yes.
A problem that is prevailing in a society or around you.
True.
So first of all, you have to be very mindful of your surroundings. What is happening around you? What is a problem people are facing in their everyday life? First, you identify a problem, and then you think of a solution which can solve that problem.
True.
So that is the first step of building a startup, right? So you take this step of identifying a problem, you think of a solution, and then what you do is you make a MVP, minimum viable product. So that's a very basic level of a product. So then you test it out in the market, you do the market research, and you test that whether it was really the problem and whether this MVP, the product that you are building, is the solution to it. So this is how you go about it.
But it's not always important. Now, I know, Haja, sorry, but I'm just going to take it a little longer, and that is that, you know, it's not really the case. So imagine that, you know, there's so many products which are based around luxury probably, you know, so imagine all of those people getting Botox these days, there might not be any requirements. So research at times can fail you. I mean, and this is for the very first time that I'm going to say this. But because, you know, for us, business is obviously Allah ne chala diya, to chala diya. And after that, there is anything else. So do you think that for all of those people who are looking forward to having a very successful product is a wonderful idea? or do you think that they should really focus on to need-based product development?
Okay, so there's no hard and fast rule on building a startup.
Obviously.
Yes. So this is the conventional method of going about in initiating a startup, that first you identify a problem.
True.
But if you have spent enough time in one industry over, let's say, a period of a decade, then you automatically know what are the challenges people are facing in my industry.
True, true, true.
So you build a startup on that problem. So basically, any startup in the world, they are addressing a problem. Any problem.
So one thing which I've witnessed is that in my office, you know, people usually do not come on time. How do you think that I can build a product around that, which can actually take them to their offices on time?
Well,
which office?
well, if at the moment, if I come up with a solution, is that you should attach it with some kind of reward through an app.
Okay.
You should gamify it. If you are coming in office for like a month or so on time, that then you give them a reward or something like that.
Yeah.
So
and then develop a product around it.
I think these are also some of the Western values that don't apply here, because I think stick works better than carrot sometimes, right? But obviously everyone has a different and a unique personality, and so it comes to businesses. And Shehzad is very enthusiastic about the startups and entrepreneurship, because I do remember a couple of times he has been asking me, you know, do you want to start something? I was like, I do not have a business acumen about it. But obviously when we talk about the startups, and there is this point, I do remember, especially in Islamabad, there came a point when there were so many flourishing shops opening up with different varieties of naan stop and all of these shops. But after some time we see that enthusiasm dies, and then obviously your business also dies with that. So I don't find that flourishing shops now. So how do we make sure that we are vibrant enough with the very fastly changing times and our startup remains on the feet, it doesn't die?
In addition to that, because Hajar, that's a wonderful question. In addition to that, or do you think that it's the stigma of people calling them tandoor wala, ek hi karobar shuru kar liya, tusi tandoor hi pa liya, or that?
Well, I would say this is kind of an innovation in an already established conventional business.
Okay. Yes.
But if we talk about startups, the key word that I spoke about earlier is the scalability.
True.
Now, what happens is, if I have a shop of, let's say, 20 by 20, what is the number of maximum customers I can serve in that shop? Maybe
5, 10.
5, 10, 15 or maximum 20, right? That is not a scalable business, because at the same time you are not able to serve so many customers. But if in a 20 by 20 room I hire multiple tech guys who are building a website, who are building an app, and then we market it around the globe, we are 3 people sitting in a 10 by 10 room, but the customers that we are serving are 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. So that's a scalability.
Yes.
That you increase your output by minimizing the inputs.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So the overheads go down, everything
goes down.
But your sales are going up.
Yes.
So you're only making money.
Very true.
You're not spending.
Yes. And the question that you have asked earlier, similarly, the failures in a convention business also happens in startups. And you have said it right, that 90% of the startups, they fail.
That's true.
Because of poor planning and because of the timings. There are just 2, 3, 4 critical factors which makes a startup fail.
Sure, go ahead, please name them.
So the first of all is a poor planning.
Okay.
That you have, if you are not experienced a startup before, or if your foundations are not very strong, then there are chances that you are going to fail.
So that means that young people might fail, and a lot of time they fail because they do not have enough experience in the first place.
And that is why there are incubators in all over the world.
Wonderful.
The incubators, they train people that if you have an idea, we are going to give you resources, we are going to fund you, we are going to give you team, and we are going to make you flourish your startup.
Right.
So then comes the incubators.
Right.
So here they get the help.
And that's where I would want to talk about ideas as well. You know, so this is something which I read somewhat around 5 or 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
And it actually stayed in my mind and in my heart as well. So it's still close to my heart. And that gentleman wrote, he said that, you know, there's 1% of the population, lesser than that, who of people who will have newer ideas, you know. So every time they're going to come with something, it's going to be a newer idea, and it's going to cater to a lot of people, and it's going to be a success, right? So then the gentleman writes, and he gives the example of Uber to Kareem. You know, he's like, okay, it's the same model which has been replicated and is successful. Why? Because of the fact that that idea, if God forbid, you know, for example, if it had like 10 steps to it, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 9, 10, all of those 10 steps are checked, right? Now what happens is that when we try to copy an idea, we might miss out a few steps out of it because we are not very well aware of it, and he says that leave it to 1% of the people for newer ideas. You know, all you have to do is the remaining 99%, just copy it the way it has been copied. That's it. You know,
Yes.
And for anybody out there, it's such an amazing formula for you to understand, just to have your own business and kind of understand what implicates. For example, Pizza Hut comes to Pakistan.
Yes.
They make sure that there's a slight change in spices and the entire recipe of the pizza. You know, you go to Saudi Arabia, you know, their fried chicken is very different from
Yes.
Pakistan, right? So
Yes.
everywhere you go geographically as well, it will have a very different application or to the people, and you have to adjust around it.
Yes.
How do you think that when we speak of, you know, having lesser cost for overheads and people sitting in 10 by 10 room and, you know, catering to the entire globe, how do you think that this application will vary, and how do you think that people can actually help themselves with what sources which are available which can guide them better if they are to operate globally?
Well, very rightly put, and a very valid question. First of all, I would like to say that even if you are copying an idea which is already in existence, what matters is the execution. It's also an old myth that the idea really matters.
Yep.
No, idea does not matter. It's in the circles of startup experts. What truly matters is the execution, how you execute that idea, how you build up the team, how you do the marketing, how you allocate the resources, and a lot of other factors, like you mentioned, barakat also as well.
True.
Like
I think that's the first step, obviously.
Yes.
But very quickly towards the end, you know, because now you've ventured into you know, startups yourself, and you're working on an artificial intelligence-based startup. Can you tell us a little bit about it? You know, if your company
yes,
allows
the
you to do
startup
so?
that we are launching very soon, and we are working on it, is tutorlab.ai.
Okay.
In which
Another
we are
tool to help students. Oh my
Yes,
God, I'm really
yes,
offended as a
exactly.
teacher.
So
Okay.
I think it's a bigger market, that's why.
Yeah,
Yes.
of course it is.
So what we are doing in that product is basically we are helping the parents to help their child to connect with the relevant tutor through AI,
Okay, wonderful.
and also assist them during their tutoring session, and
Wonderful.
also after the tutoring session, all assisted by the AI.
And it's a
That's
great idea,
wonderful.
because imagine just the other day my daughter came up to me, and you know, so we had questions with 36 square and whatnot, and I was like, yeah, I've forgotten the process. So I know how to deduce a figure, but I do not know what the process is. And she's like, Daddy, can you help me? And I'm like, yeah, you know, I can give you the answer, but I do not certainly know what the process needs to be. She's like, okay, I need to do the working, the teacher needs to check it.
LCM and HCF,
Yeah,
something like that.
Something like that, and
Yeah.
I wasn't able to understand it. So, you know, if there's such an application out there which is going to aid parents as well, I think it's going to be wonderful, because it feels like as if you're going to school again when you're educating or teaching your children.
Very
Yes. Thank you so much for coming here.
Welcome.
Thank you for having such a wonderful, vibrant cross-pollination of ideas about the startups, about the technology-based startups. And I think Pakistan is a very vibrant and fertile ground for the technology-based startups, because there's so many coming up. But obviously, when we talk about the